Herman Harrington joined mountain rescue to quiet his nightmares about Leonard, the man who died saving him in World War II. One big rescue, he thought, save one child, and maybe the guilt would all stop. But he never expected the mountain to answer back. It's easy to step out of the past, but it's not so easy to move on from it. As a former radio op during World War II, the past is always there. It's nagging at my thoughts. I survived when hundreds of thousands of my comrades didn't. I will always remember the pure relief on my wife Rose's face when I returned, but I will also remember looking over her shoulder and seeing that radiating distress in the eyes of the parents whose son didn't make it off that train. Leonard, he was a good man. He died trying to save me. Even now, some 30 years later, I still woke up, covered in sweat, shouting his name. In my dreams, I relived the horror when he pulled me through the mud to safety, and then he stepped back to get my radio, and then I heard that boom, and as I opened my eyes, I realized just my grainy bedroom. Sometimes when this occurred, I shook Rose, thinking that she was Leonard, and I'd pull away, mumble an apology, try to ground myself as my mind replayed that moment. All those years ago, when I flipped Leonard's lifeless body over and I saw the bloody flesh where his face had once been. Recently, the nightmares had become more frequent, and I was distant and I was short-tempered with Rose. I snapped at the littlest things, and I felt awful for it. Rose said I needed to do something to take my mind off these things. She spoke to a friend of a friend, and I ended up volunteering for the mountain rescue team. One big save, that's what I told myself, and maybe all the noise would quit. With my military past, they didn't hesitate in letting me join. I lived in Vermont my whole life. As such, I was familiar with the area and its endless trails and terrains. I climbed Glastenbury Mountain more times than I could remember. I knew it well. Abenaki Native Americans say that there's a stone up there, opens up, swallows men whole. During one of my darkest days, when I climbed up there, I picked a stone, one with a square patch of white, pulled myself up onto it. I wailed, and I pleaded for it to swallow me. But back then, I felt foolish for putting my longing into a story and hoping beyond reason that it would end my misery. I don't think I really wanted to die. Instead, I felt like I deserved to be punished for living when Leonard could not. Being on the rescue team didn't fully erase my demons, but it did give me a purpose. It made me feel like I could do some good. Some of the missions were straightforward ones, like a hiker we found sheltering in a rocky gap with a broken ankle, and a woman whose dog returned without her after she tripped and knocked herself unconscious a mile south of the Goddard shelter. It did feel good, playing my part in rescuing these people, but the feeling soon faded. I was left feeling empty again. I told myself I needed one big save, to be able to forgive myself for my past, to finally move on. When I got the call through my colleague Des, it was about the little girl spotted alone on the mountain. I thought this one could be it, my means of redemption. I had no idea what horrors lay in store for me. Instead, I kissed Rose on the cheek, shoved my feet into my trusty hiking boots. It was mid-evening, 6:41 p.m. by the time we began our search, so I knew we had about 3 hours tops before the summer sun set. Des and a few other members of the team were there too. They went one way, through the abandoned town, and Des and I, we went the other. The little girl had been sighted close to the top by a couple of hikers. I said that she was about 7 or 8 and wearing a bright red coat. They saw no adults around, but they didn't think much of it at the time. It was only when, as they were leaving, they saw the same red coat dangling from a branch. Then they feared the worst. They tried looking for her, and then one of them walked down to get help while the other stayed behind to keep searching. Des checked with the police. There'd been no reports of missing children in the area, and we knew there was a chance this could all be a hoax or a mistake, but I sensed something real about it, something that could save me. Des and I headed on the long trail. There's a trek stretching through the surrounding woods, and as we walked, we checked our radios, these small things that neatly fit in her hand, far cry from the bulky SCR 536 walkie-talkies I used in the war. We gritted these woods until the map bled at the folds from our sweat. It was relentless humid heat. There was so much ground to cover. It felt impossible to do it alone, so Des went off to check another area that we pinpointed on the map. We agreed to keep track of each other via our radios. It was eerily silent out there, and even the mosquitoes seemed to chime at a minimum. Mosquitoes had stopped biting. In Vermont summer, that's never good. You learn in war, when nature goes quiet, nature knows something. I stopped to get my water flask out of my backpack, and that's when I heard it, an extra footstep. And you tell yourself that that's just the wind, and then you stop breathing to hear it again. I turned around, staring through the gaps in the trees as I tried to make sense of what I just heard. I couldn't see or hear Des. It had been my footstep, a footstep I hadn't made. I gulped back some water, tried convincing myself that my thirst, that's what made me imagine things. I continued through those woods feeling very unsettled, but knowing I had a job to do. I checked in with Dez on the radio when he answered back, saying there's no sign of the girl, so he was heading up the mountain. I thought I would feel some relief on leaving that part of the woods behind me, but as the ground grew steeper and the rocks more evident, the uneasiness only seemed to follow me. On more than one occasion, I stopped walking and I heard an extra footstep. I told myself that that's just an echo or my own darn imagination. I told myself so many things I didn't fully believe. I walked along that path, humming to myself as a distraction from what I believed to be my own crazed thoughts. 7:02 p.m., and on hearing a bird squawk above me, I looked up and I spotted something entwined in the branches of a conifer tree, too far up to reach, and I squinted my eyes to get a closer look. I saw red wool. A breeze could have blown it up there, and that's unlikely. There was no breeze. I called Dez on the radio, and I waited for the static to settle before I said, "I see red," tangled in a conifer tree about 2 miles north of. Dez's muffled voice sounded out and morphed into a deafening static that changed into a familiar voice speaking one single word, Rubrum. It was my voice. I would always recognize my own darn voice, but it was a word that I never uttered before. Damn it, I didn't even know what it meant. I looked up at that woven streak of red, and then I carried on my way, determined to climb the mountain by nightfall. And the higher I grew, the more the last glow of light seemed to curdle, and as I continued, I realized I was unknowingly humming in time to my footsteps. And as I stopped to pinpoint my location on the map with sweaty fingers, I found myself humming to an extra step, one I was certain I did not make. Closer. I looked around, feeling as though I was being watched, but at the same time, feeling no presence at all. I shivered despite my overheated state, and I forced myself forward along the dirt path lined with crooked rocks and partly visible tree roots. I made sure I stayed hydrated, but the extra footstep continued to haunt me, and I felt afraid to stop walking, and I pushed myself to carry on, gripping onto a tree branch and rock sides to force myself onward. I told myself I must not stop. I had to find the little girl, but I also needed to escape from myself. I needed this one big save. Finally, I'd be free of my nightmares, to get Leonard's missing face out of my head. Colors seemed to blur around me, day meeting night, my own thoughts colliding. I forced myself on. Through the trees, I saw flashes of red, and I veered off the path. I was chasing this color, and it seemed to elude me. And higher up, 7:19 p.m., through the red, I heard footsteps that weren't mine, and I saw a flash of muted yellow. A man. He staggered toward me, a backpack on his shoulders, and this wild look in his eyes. I connected the dots. I realized this is the hiker, the one who stayed behind. I tried to calm him down, but he grabbed my arms, and he said, she smiled as she vanished into the rock. She smiled, and I smiled too. This is where things really turned. I told him I would call my colleague on the radio and relay his information, but he shook his head. He tried to pull me the wrong way. He backed down the mountain. There's no time. It ate her, coat and all. I offered him some water and a granola bar, but he just laughed. This static, crazed laugh seemed to bounce off the trees. And then he turned, and he ran, his footsteps becoming lost to his surroundings. I didn't know what to think anymore. That man was delirious. I had a choice, follow him or continue to the top and try to locate the little girl. Choice always has a cost. I called Dez on the radio, and I told him about that man, and he replied, well, that sounds crazy. This whole thing could just be a big hoax. Damn time wasters. I replied that I was almost at the top now, so I was going to check it out. As I ended that call, static echoed around me, followed by a single word said in my voice. A word I didn't utter. Rubrum. In a panic, I croaked into the radio, asking Dez if he'd said something. Only static replied, and through it came the same word in my voice. Rubrum. I almost dropped the radio. Didn't make any sense. I just needed to distract myself, to focus on saving the little girl. I continued to the top of the mountain, determined to redeem myself for Leonard's death, determined to follow the blurs of red, to find her. I carried on like that for I'm not sure how long, but sunlight remained above me. My radio was silent, so the little girl hadn't been found yet. Dez or someone would have contacted me if she had. My tiredness caught up with me. I almost tripped, grabbing onto a large stone to steady myself. Beneath my foot, I saw a scrap of red. Proof. I bent to reach it, pulling a piece of woolen red fabric free. Hello, is someone there? I shouted into the wilderness. Hello, do you need help? I heard a thud, a single footstep. I looked to my side and I realized what I was touching. A large stone with a small square patch of white on it. I'd seen this stone before. I was sure of it. It was the same one I'd climbed and I pleaded to swallow me whole. Gripping that scrap of red fabric, I pulled myself up onto that stone and I crawled along its surface. I saw the wilderness beneath me, an endless image of green. I was on top of the world, but in reality, I was squashed beneath it. I sat there thinking I would never find that girl. I shouldn't have let that disoriented hiker run off like that. I felt like I had tried so hard to put things right, but only ended up making everything worse, and I started to cry. Again on that exact same rock. I hugged my legs, and I longed for redemption that I knew I didn't deserve. My radio made a static sound, and I went to answer it, and through the interference, I heard that single word in my voice. Rubrum. I dropped the radio. I watched it roll over the stone and down into the unknown. You know that panic? The second your hands just won't obey. I swore and I scrambled forward, grabbing into air. My foot caught on something. I turned to look. The corner of the stone, I saw a piece of red woolen fabric. I thought I dropped the piece that I'd found, and when I noticed it and tied around my fingers, I knew this one was different. I pulled on it to set it free, noticing this shiny Ladybug button. It wouldn't budge. It was molded into the stone. You know, some rocks, they open the way a mouth opens. I scratched at it with my nails and I tried with all my strength to pull it free. It tore on my hands, sending me tumbling backwards off the stone and onto the path. If I'd fallen the other way, I would have died instantly. And I wasn't sure if I felt relief or disappointment. I rose to my feet and I stared at that stone. Pulling myself up, I looked at that spot where that fabric had just been. Nothing was there. That stone claimed it. It swallowed it whole. For that, I was certain. And as much as it saddened me, I knew I couldn't save her. I would have begged that stone to swallow me too, but I thought it rose. I knew I couldn't do that to her, even though she did deserve better than me. Last night, in a trance of my own failures, I started walking down that mountain. As darkness fell, I pulled my flashlight from my backpack and I used that to guide me. I didn't stop, not once. I didn't allow for the extra footstep to find me. At the end of that trail, I saw an abundance of bright lights and I knew I was safe. Trailhead? That was the last chance. That's when I allowed myself to stop, and I uncurled my sweaty hand and I gasped at what I saw. It was real. I could see it with my own eyes. A torn piece of woolen red fabric with a shiny Ladybug button. During that moment, I knew what Rubrum meant. I don't know how I knew it. I just knew it. Rubrum was a color. It was the color red. Herman Harrington died in his sleep in 2001. On attending the scene, the funeral director found something in his hand, a piece of woolen fabric with a shiny red Ladybug button attached. He wanted one big safe. The mountain gave him one big truth. After the rescue mission, Herman had told his colleague, Desmond Riley, about his experience, but felt disbelieved. The hikers who reported the sighting of the girl never came forward, nor did a parent ever call on the disappearance of their daughter. This led Des and the local authorities to believe that it was a hoax. Tales of the man-eating stone in Glastenbury Mountain remain, and to this day, hikers continue to disappear without a trace. For more scary horror stories, please share and subscribe.